I'm discussing the 10 antinomies of apocalyptic humanism. Um, the last video I made was kind of a just general discussion of what I mean by apocalyptic humanism. And before I enumerate the 10 antinomies in this video, I'll talk a little bit about what an antinomy is. So, so generally speaking, like you might think it were the 10 principles of apocalyptic humanism, um, that they're sort of like articles of faith or principles of an attitude, uh, belief system, and but I don't think that a principle is right. I think that you should have an antinomy instead. So an antinomy is that word. If you use that word, for those who don't know, if you use that word, you're probably referring to Kant and Hegel. So, in certain circles, this is a very famous story. In others, it is not. That in Kant's Critique of Reason, he enumerated um, a number of antinomies about God, the world, and the soul. Um, and they were basically topics that you couldn't use um, you couldn't use thought to gain real knowledge of, because you could make an argument for either one of two contradictory claims about the topic, and and feel like you were right, and so they were contradictory. Examples for him were like that, say that the universe is infinite or that it's finite, or that the soul is mortal versus immortal. And the idea is that for Kant it was that philosophy just should, and science should just don't even try to produce knowledge about that stuff, because by virtue of the nature of the kind of collective mind that we all inhabit, they are um, uh, they're on the horizon. They're illusions, basically. So then, equally famous move is that Hegel took the idea of an antinomy and proposed more or less that um, antinomies are only ever relatively contradictory, that they may be contradictory from the perspective of a certain era in history or a certain theoretical model, um, but that um, from a higher or new perspective, their contradiction can be resolved. Um, Not just that, but um, that there's a kind of motivating force that the contradiction has. That like, it's almost like if you imagine sort of the world spirit climbing the rungs of a ladder to heaven, that each rung is one of these contradictions. Um, that by wrestling with the contradictions, um, you generate genuine, brand new knowledge, um, that uh, that you wouldn't have otherwise, and that from this is an additional related point, that every era, every world we inhabit with belief systems and technologies and so forth that we take for granted, every world like that sort of um, has at its perimeter productive antinomies of these kinds. They're kind of like the stitches that kind of stitch the world together. There were always in between series of antinomies like this, and that's part of sort of what our finitude is. And then Marx makes an additional point that um, that this doesn't have to just be theoretical. That like say the contradictions of different classes in society is an antinomy of this kind, and that kind of produces revolutionary fervor or whatever. So um, now it's worth noting that um, so then Hegel goes on to construct this vast system that is made precisely of these antinomies kind of stacking up into all things, all of history, uh, and he never expressly addresses the specific antinomies. Right? I mean, he kind of does, but not so effectively. The specific antinomies that Kant brought up. And so, for example, we still don't know whether space is infinite or finite, um, though as our technology expands, you can imagine finding out. You can imagine, if so. For example, let's say that space, if it's the case that space is finite, but like a torus, or like a globe, we could find out that it's finite by traveling so far in space if we had a vessel that could do this, and then arriving at the point where we left. Um, whether the soul is mortal or immortal, I think we have no idea how to solve that problem right now, but you can imagine that as a result of other developments, we might be able to in the future. I don't know. Um, and then so in the political field, there are these, in our world. So there's theoretical ones. Politically, it's like, it's the way that like, you know, everyone is so fixated on politics. Not to condemn people for that. I mean, politics is such an important topic right now, just because things are getting so confusing, and everyone, always accuses one another of contradictions. Like say like a right wing person will be like, you're pro Hamas and pro LGBT, like that's an insane contradiction, and then you might try to um, argue back and make sense of it, or from someone on the left, they'll be like, you're pro faith and family, but also pro capitalism. That's insane. And the idea is that those two, because being pro both of those things, kind of by definition, annihilate one another. Fundamentalist Islam and being queer, or stable, the stable life world that is pre-capitalist, and capitalism needing to annihilate that. Um, and so my 10 antinomies, they don't address anything really particular like those things, um, but they are, but they're like that. They're views that they're contradictory pairs of views that you can. Um, there's no way at the moment, I think, to really resolve the contradictions, but they're worth recognizing and savoring for what they are, because the more attention that is paid to that, um, the more there's something salutary about kind of that being a path to a next era. Like, and in the more political ones, I mean, probably, I don't think on either side of those things you can, in our world, definitively justify those takes. But what they both kind of point to is that there's something deeper that hasn't been discovered yet. Maybe a new politics that that everybody can actually agree on. That's not out of the question because we are all human, and so uh, you know we should actually, and at some level we mostly share the same values too. Um, so yeah. Anyway, I think you get what I'm saying. So anyway, I'll stop there for now, and in coming videos, I'll just do one for each of these 10 antinomies of apocalyptic humanism.